I know I'm not alone in struggling with thoughts of what to say or maybe not say anything, or getting paralyzed in front of the endless news media updates. And, struggling with what kind of expression or all the work planned, should it be carried out, or should we just cancel everything or just talk only about what is going on in Ukraine at this moment? And then I hear voices from inside of Ukraine, from colleagues and artists, saying that, no, please go on doing your work, continue at what you do, but don't pretend as if this is not happening. Add something, comment on it. And that is also why we have inserted this point in the program. I'm going to read 2 entries from a diary written by Yevgenia Belorusets, who is a photographer and a writer. For instance, she has done a long project about residents living on Gogol Street for years, and another project about women in Donbass. But now, and since the first day of war, she is in Kiev. She's writing, and it's posted every day online at the webpage of the publisher Isolari. And I will read day 1 and day 21. Thursday, February 24, day 1, the beginning. Today I woke up early in the morning to see 8 unanswered calls on my cell phone. It was my parents and some friends. At first I thought something had happened to my family and that my friends were trying to reach me, because for some reason my parents had alerted them first. Then my imagination went in another direction, and I thought of an accident, a dangerous situation in the center of Kiev, something to warn your friends about. I felt a cold uneasiness. I called my cousin because her beautiful voice always has a calming effect on me, brave and rational. She just said, "Kiev has been shelled. A war has broken out." Many things have a beginning. When I think about the beginning, I imagine a line drawn very clearly through a white space. The eye observes the simplicity of this trail of movement, one that is sure to begin somewhere and end somewhere. But I have never been able to imagine the beginning of a war. Strange. I was in the Donbass when war with Russia broke out in 2014. But I had entered the war then, entered into a foggy, unclear zone of violence. I still remember the intense guilt I felt about being a guest in a catastrophe, a guest who was allowed to leave at will because I lived somewhere else. The war was already there, an intruder, something strange, foreign and insane, which had no justification to happen in that place and at that time. Back then, I kept asking people in the Donbass how all this could start, and always got different answers. I think that the beginning of this war in the Donbass was one of the most mythologized moments for the people of Kiev, precisely because it remained incomprehensible how such an event is born. At that time, in 2014, people in Kiev said, People from Donbass, those Ukrainian Putin sympathizers, invited the war to our country. This alleged invitation has for some time been considered an explanation for how the absolutely impossible, a war with Russia, suddenly became possible after all. After I finished the phone call with my cousin, I paced around my apartment for a while. My head was absolutely blank. I had no idea what to do now. Then my phone rang again. One call followed the next. Friends came forward with plans to escape. Some called to make sure we were still alive. I quickly grew tired. I talked a lot, constantly repeating the words, "the war." In between, I would look out the window and listen to see if the explosions were approaching. The view from the window was ordinary, but the sounds of the city were strangely muffled. No children yelling, no voices in the air. Later, I went out and discovered an entirely new environment, an emptiness that I had never seen here, even on the most dangerous days of the Maidan protests. Sometime later, I hear that 2 children died from shelling in Kherson Oblast, in the south of the country, and that a total of 57 people died in the war today. The numbers turned into something very concrete, as if I had already lost someone myself. I felt angry at the whole world. I thought, this has been allowed to happen. It is a crime against everything human, against the great common space where we live and hope for a future. I'm staying with my parents tonight. I've visited a bomb shelter next to the house, so I know where we will go when the shelling comes later. The war has begun. It is after midnight. I will hardly be able to fall asleep, and there is no point in enumerating what has changed forever. Wednesday, March 16, day 21. Tactical retreat. One does not speak to a ruin. One contemplates it, holds it in their mind. It is war's silent witness in the middle of the city. Looking at ruin gives the observer a certain distance from events. What does this distance mean? It is in no way an emotional distance, but a detachment that gives strength and the feeling that you can control how close the war comes to you. As a giant trace of an inhuman force, a ruin devours everything human that makes up the street you're standing on. I keep thinking about what it means to observe the consequences of the bombardment in the city. It is something of a construction site, one that is not built but dismantled. In the front of the ruin yesterday, among shattered glass, deformed scraps of metal and pieces of the roof, I met a woman, an elderly lady who was looking for cigarettes. The kiosk where she bought them every day was so badly damaged that all the glass covering the windows and doors had been blown out. The salesmen themselves were no longer around. The cigarettes lay unprotected in the shop window. The lady was asking everyone where to get a pack nearby. I suggested she leave the money in the shop window and take the pack as a kind of self-service. Then I asked her why she decided to stay in Kiev during these uncertain times. She told me that her mother, who turned 100 3 months ago, died this past week. In the war's early days, it was unimaginable that she and her husband would leave the city. Now she was simply here. Maybe she would stay. Her eyes were shining. She even looked a little happy. She was a mathematician, a scientist who came to Kiev from Murmansk as a child. With many quips, she told me the tangled story of her family, saved time and again from war, hunger, and Stalin's repressions. She spoke melodically and with a delicate touch, as if the words of the narrative had bound themselves together beforehand, only waiting for a listener. Despite her age, there was something young about her face, and she moved quickly and gracefully among stones and splinters. Our conversation didn't last long, but I kept thinking back to it. Sometimes in war, you have the feeling that you don't want to lose other people, even after fleeting encounters. And now that I've described that meeting, I feel I did something to hold on to it. The air raid alarm doesn't sound for the moment. We are safe. During the curfew, authorities recommended darkening the windows and turning on the lights as sparingly as possible. The streets are empty and the houses look abandoned. It is a relief to think that at least these houses are not in danger right now, as they try with all their might to mask the lives of their inhabitants, to make them invisible. Urban life makes a tactical retreat during the lockdown, all the while hoping to return again tomorrow, when the street will be seen as a street rather than a source of danger. Mariupol is undergoing something quite different. About 1,000 people whose houses had been destroyed found refuge in the Donetsk Regional Theatre of Drama, a large building in the city center. In satellite images, you can see that next to the theater, the Russian word for children was written twice in chalk in capital letters. Perhaps this word was written on the ground at risk of death, in the hope that it would provide protection from the bombs and shelling. The word looks like a warning, a dialogue with someone who could never imagine attacking such a place. A Kiev friend of my mother's, who had worked as a theater director with Russian colleagues, still insists that Russia is attacking only military infrastructure. When my mother objects, but the apartment buildings are damaged, he replies, "That was a mistake, and believe me, they will punish the responsible parties." When I read the word children in these photos, I can understand the belief that the unimaginable would never happen, even when the war has already become so ghastly. Today the theater was bombed. We are talking about what has been called a high-performance bomb. What does that mean? It means that the building no longer exists. At the time of writing, because of the constant shelling, relief workers cannot approach the site to try to comb through the rubble for survivors. I am safe. The air raid alarm is silent, and theoretically one could even go to sleep. Tomorrow is the beginning of another day. New events will come, and tomorrow we will speak of them and contemplate them instead of the theater in Mariupol. I can't imagine it. The days of the war should not draw to a close just like any other days in life. Someone has given this war permission. The word has deliberate, doubted, and still allowed it. It may be too late, but the sky over Mariupol must be closed at once. The next morning, I learned that rescue workers were able to reach the rubble of the theater after all. Out from the bunker underneath the theater, survivors are climbing out.
So many thanks, Ida Börjel, for this beautiful reading and talk to Maria Stepanova. Many thanks to you as well, Maria. And Pavel for your presentation. A lot of courage in that, really. I would again ask you to remember to also help the PEN vad heter fonden nu? Akutfonden to pay money to also help artists and especially writers who are in urgent need of money. We also at the museum we sell photographs by two Ukrainian artists who are also still in Ukraine. They call Krolnikovsky Art, a duo. And we have two series by them. One's from the Euromaidan, from the uprising in 2014, and the other series is about when they left. They had to flee from the Crimea Peninsula and Donbass in 2014. So that's also a way to support artists. Thank you, everyone. And please go on also and take part of the beautiful program that will take place at Stadsteatern this evening. Thank you.